Hello and welcome to my channel, iWinLose Gaming. With a couple patches of Fontainian variety under our belts, we've had some time to digest the new incoming changes to the meta. In today's video, I'll be going over the top 7 shifts in Fontaine's meta in Genshin Impact. The first big shift in the meta is prevalent with the new characters that we've gotten. Cat Hat Man, Laser Man, Diving Man, and the soon-to-be released Punch Man. Now what do all these mans have in common? They're all normal and charged attack based DPS characters. Lyney, Neuvillette, and Freminette are all dependent on comparatively energy-friendly and lack of long setup times, normal and charged attacks. On top of that, these characters all have new constellations, which provide levels to basic attacks. Basic attacks for other characters have never had constellations which add levels to them prior to Lyney's release. So yeah, the recent wave of DPS characters has had a large focus on their basic attacks, which is an interesting shift from the majority of previous characters that largely relied on their skills and/or elemental bursts. Of course, there are quite a few normal attack and a couple charge attack based characters prior to Fontaine's release, but these new DPS characters have been exclusively normal and charge attack characters. Now the sixth topic revolves around another key mechanic and theme of Fontaine, which is HP draining and self-healing. All 3 of the new 5-star DPS characters implement this mechanic. They all seem to really enjoy hitting themselves and healing themselves. Now, as of what's currently in the game, this allows them all to greatly utilize the new artifact set, the Wriothesley Hunter. While the current benefit in today's meta is only really to utilize this new artifact set, I can absolutely foresee future characters further expanding on this HP draining mechanic. While I cannot talk too much about the future due to Newton's dastardly armpits, I think it's reasonable to speculate that the meta will have a greater focus on punching yourself at some point in Fontaine's meta. And heck, perhaps this mechanic will even benefit healers in the future, as healers have generally been a bit lackluster past the early game if, well, all those healers do is heal. The third topic I wanted to talk about are the new enemies. miHoYo is actually quite ingenious when it comes to designing new enemies in order to change the general playstyle. Let's take our Pearly Unicorn friend as an example. This thing has a new type of electro-elemental shield that increases its resistances all the way up to 90 in the abyss while its shield is active. This means that unlike many other elemental shields, which makes the enemy invincible, you're still able to do damage to our Pearly Unicorn friend, even while its shield is up. Because its resistances are so high while at the same time not being too high, this makes Resistance Shred extremely powerful against it, adding additional value to things like Zhongli's shield, Xingqiu's Constellation 6, and heck, even Traveler's Resistance Shred. Yep, some speedrunners are actually using Traveler for the additional resistance shred that they provide against this thing. And the fourth topic is still focused on this new shield mechanic, as it has a lot of further implications which we need to discuss. These new elemental shields still allow an element to be applied onto the enemy. Most of the older shields don't actually allow you to stick an element onto the enemy. This allows you to swirl or even create some reactions that were impossible back in the day. And the type of element that the shield is will have interesting rippling effects on what ends up being viable against it. For example, if you've tried to use reverse melt against this Pearly Unicorn thing, well, it's pretty tricky to say the least. If you rely on something like Kazuha's Elemental Burst to reapply Pyro, well, Kazuha's Burst swirls the Electro Shield, thus causing overloaded, and everything becomes a soupy mess, oftentimes removing Pyro, thus making reverse melt super unreliable. And yet, if you don't use an Animo character to shred cryo resistance, well, this thing's gonna have way too much cryo resistance for it to be worthwhile to actually hit it. And you're better off focusing on destroying its shield instead. Anyway, the unique and new interactions with these new types of shields will uniquely limit what playstyles are viable on certain sides of the new abysses. And that further ties into point number 5. Because we've been seeing these types of shields, this actually favors many mono-elemental damage teams. Due to reactions often being a giant mess, mono-damage focused teams like Neuvillette and Lyney have been absolutely obliterating the new abysses. What's interesting about Neuvillette and Lyney, especially at Constellation Zero, is that their damage is not really tremendously higher than traditional teams. However, their ease of use, lack of necessity to multi-swirl, and lack of need to rely on reactions, and along with the new enemies with these unique shields, teams don't need as many reactions to excel now. I honestly find it a bit ironic that Genshin Impact started off with a complicated elemental reaction system where the meta revolved around those reactions, and 3 years later, it's finally simplifying gameplay to encourage more simple mono-element teams. And the 6th topic I wanted to briefly mention before the final, most important 7th topic are the Numa and Osha mechanics. Currently, Numa and Osha aren't really playing a huge role in the meta, but I can see them creeping in at some point to play a more important role, but still not be a necessity. I'm actually quite happy with the way that they've implemented these mechanics so far, since they don't feel absolutely necessary and still allow us to use our more traditional teams and playstyles without an over-reliance on Osha and Numa. But at the same time, I do want to see these mechanics become a bit more important moving forward, as we've had time to build up some new characters to tackle these challenges. And the 7th most important reason is the Great Husbando Reckoning. For too long have the husbandos of Genshin Impact been overshadowed by their waifu counterparts in terms of DPS. Ever since Ganyu's release, Ayaka, Raiden, Hu Tao, husbandos have been struggling to claim the mantle of top-tier DPS character. And for far too long has the DPS husbandos been oppressed, forever to languish as not quite as good as their waifu counterparts. But in came the tipping point with Fontaine. Both Neuvillette and Lyney are absolutely cracked DPS characters, further amplified by the meta being friendly towards their kits and being more friendly towards mono-style damage teams. And heck, we have another DPS husbando coming up, Wriothesley. Now, only time will tell how good he'll be, but step aside DPS waifus because now it's finally time for DPS husbandos to shine. So yeah, those are my 7 biggest changes to Genshin Impact's meta thanks to Fontaine's release. Let me know down in the comments below what you agree with, disagree with, and what you think the biggest shakeup to the meta is or will be. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.